Well, what is up, everybody? Good to see you guys today. Hey, my name is Louie. I'm with ICN, Irresistible Church Network. So glad you guys are joining us today for our webinar. Hey, before we get started, we would love to know who you guys are, where you're from. So please change your chat setting to everyone and put your name and church and location. We'd love to know who you guys are, where you're from, where you're joining us from today. And we can't wait to get started. So basically, if this is one of your first times ever interacting with the Irresistible Church Network, we are a group of churches around the world that are all committed to this idea of designing our churches to attract and engage unchurched people. And we just like innovating around that idea and contextualizing that idea. And we love helping church leaders everywhere go further faster when it comes to that concept. And as you know, that is a very comprehensive concept from A to Z. All kinds of topics fall into that. And so right now we're in the middle of a webinar series. This is part 2 of a webinar series based on a book that is coming out this summer. So basically, we have gathered multiple lead pastors of partner churches of Irresistible Church Network from around the world. We've gathered them, multiple of them, to write chapters for a book called A Church Every Community Needs. And we've been walking through all these principles of what that looks like. And today is no different. Today we have a special guest with us. Jamey Stuart is the lead pastor of Believers Church in Norfolk, Virginia. And Jamey's going to be joining us today because he has written one of the chapters of that book. And today we're just going to have a conversation talking about that a little bit. So Jamey, why don't you start off by introducing everyone to yourself, your family, your church. Tell us a little bit about yourself here.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, Louie, good to see you.
Yes,
so
sir.
I'm in Suffolk, Virginia, which is in the southeast corner of the state of Virginia, Virginia Beach, Norfolk area. Suffolk is the largest city in the state of Virginia by landmass. It's ginormous, not so ginormous population-wise, but we're on the suburban sprawl of Norfolk, Virginia. And I've been the lead pastor here for 20 years, been a part of the church for 30 years. And so my family grew up here. I've got 2 adult kids and been married 35 years and have a granddaughter. We're in this very cool season of empty nesting and all the other stuff.
Yeah.
And about in 2017, December 2017, we completed a years-long project of relocating. So we outgrew some space, bought some land 5 miles away, same community, different neighborhood, and built the space that we're in today, which is really what we're going to be talking about today.
Oh, wow. So not just a building project, but a relocation. That's
Yeah, we did several building projects and then a relocation. Yeah.
Oh, man. Okay. Very cool. Well, Jamey, thank you so much for jumping on here and just sharing some of your experiences through the years of doing this, what you figured out, what you still don't know, pitfalls, best practices, things to avoid. So this is going to be awesome. So I loved reading your chapter. This is going to be coming out in the book this summer. So thank you for taking time to do that. Yeah, but I got to ask you, when you started your chapter, you talked about something. We'll get to the building stuff in a minute, everybody.
Sure.
You talked about a road trip at the beginning of your chapter, a coast to coast road trip. Is this right? Tell us a little bit about.
Yeah, so road trip of a lifetime. So my age, I grew up, my childhood idol was Evel Knievel. So motorcycles all the time was my dream, and bucket list was a coast to coast trip on a motorcycle, and I managed to pull that off in 2019 with a couple of buddies. 33 states, 10,000 miles, 20 national parks over the course of 30 days. It was just incredible.
Oh my gosh, that is unbelievable. Yeah. Would you believe me if I told you I've never even driven a motorcycle? So
I would believe that.
They're scary, man. It's like you're just sitting on an engine. I don't know how you guys do that.
Yeah, my first car was a motorcycle, so it's deep in me.
Oh, okay, there you go. Yeah, so in the chapter we're talking about this road trip, you also talked about something that kind of caught your eye on this road trip, specifically about the church and church buildings. And I
Yeah.
failed to mention this first. This falls in line because the chapter of Jamey's, the title of Jamey's chapter in this book is "Should the Church Stop Building Church Buildings?" And that title got my attention. I was like, oh, I want to read this. What's he talking about here? So tell us a little about what caught your eye about church buildings as you're on this coast to coast motorcycle road trip.
Yeah, so first of all, just like no matter, there's a lot of rural America. There's a lot of nothing out there. But even in the towns that had almost nothing, there were church buildings. There were church buildings absolutely everywhere. And you hear the stats of churches that are closing down. I mean, every year, however many hundreds or thousands or whatever it is. I think a lot of them are in these rural communities that I found myself kind of riding through. But one of the things that stood out to me was just the sheer volume of church buildings that are out there is staggering. And so it started getting me to thinking, like, the church is a bit of we're kind of real estate tycoons, like we own, who knows how many, acres of land, and who knows how many millions of square footage are represented in these church buildings all over the place. And what I saw was, for the most part, if it wasn't on a Sunday, these church buildings were virtually empty. Maybe a car or two out front where, pastor's probably there, prepping for Sunday or whatever. But for the most part, like these buildings, I mean, a lot of them just look empty, abandoned, whatever, totally underutilized for sure. And even in larger suburban locations, if you passed by on a Monday, Tuesday, there was just nothing happening in these spaces. And it just occurred to me, like, how, like, one of the greatest things that we possess as far as land and buildings and all of these kinds of things. And yet when you drive by, like, the impression you get is there's just not much happening there.
Yeah. So talk about that a little bit, because on one hand, it's kind of cool to think about how the presence of the church, as you're riding around seeing this, man, the church is everywhere. But you also had another thought of, like, hey, this possibly be causing a negative perception, people outside the church about the church by the way we use or don't use our buildings. Tell us
for sure. So it was not uncommon in communities to drive by some of these churches, and they would have chains across the entrance of their driveways to their parking lots, apparently sending a message that the community wasn't welcome there unless they happen to be open. It's like, we don't even want you to turn around in our parking lot. That was kind of the message that you kind of got. And another thing that I noticed is, in some of these suburban sprawl areas, and it happened to us too in our previous location, where we had been rural and then the community kind of built up around us. And so here were a lot of churches that were sitting in the middle of pretty high valued real estate, and all kinds of hustle bustle going on around them. Those places sitting there kind of empty, and it just, I don't know, it's this contrast of they're in a community, but they don't seem to really be a part of the community that they're in. There's just nothing going on there.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That definitely gets your attention when there is a contrast of the
such a
community.
contrast.
Okay. So just to catch everybody up, we're having a conversation about a chapter of a book that is coming out this summer, written by multiple authors that are all lead pastors of partner churches of Irresistible Church Network. This chapter is called "Should the Church Stop Building Church Buildings?" So we're going to be talking about that a little bit. As we're talking about with Jamey, we are going to have a Q&A at the end. So please go ahead and start putting your questions for Jamey in the chat. Make sure you change your chat setting to everyone. Put your question in the chat. We will collect those, and then we'll have a Q&A time for Jamey at the end. So Jamey, in addition to this road trip you're on and what you noticed about seeing, hundreds, if not thousands of church buildings across the country, there was something else that also was a catalyst to changing your mind or at least challenging the way you were thinking about church buildings.
Yeah.
And that was a seminar that you had the opportunity to attend. Tell us a little bit
Yeah,
about that.
so this was probably a decade ago. It was long before the road trip kind of confirmed what was starting to
Oh, okay,
be
yeah.
seated in me. So about a decade or so ago, our church was experiencing a pretty big growth spurt, and we were landlocked, and so we were adding services, and we were reconfiguring space, and we were doing our best to maximize the space that we were in. Honestly, the last thing I wanted to do was, I mean, most pastors don't particularly enjoy doing building program kind of stuff, and a relocation seemed so daunting to me. Um, so we're on this trajectory. Things are growing. Do we go multi-site? Do we do whatever it is that we're going to do?
Mm-hmm.
And I had no idea what we were going to do, but I knew that we needed to start thinking about doing something. And I got this flyer, mass mailer, that probably went to every church in our zip code or our area or whatever. And part of it said, one of the things that it said was free lunch. So that got my attention. So it was in Richmond, which is not very far away from us, and free lunch. And it talked about how to design your space to engage your community more. And that kind of caught my eye. And so our staff was relatively small at the time. We had a church van, and we could all fit in the church van. So I said, "Hey guys, we're going to do a road trip, and we're going to go to this seminar. At the bare minimum, we're going to get a free lunch.
Yeah.
And but listen, we're not buying anything. We're not signing up for anything." It was like we were getting ready to go to this.
Stand strong,
Yeah, yeah,
like a timeshare.
timeshare
Yeah.
presentation. Yeah,
Yeah.
like we are not getting worn down by these people. We're just going, and my thought was, let's at least get some ideas about designing space, because we're going to be doing it at some point down the road.
Mm-hmm.
And we get there, and the guy leading the seminar, his name is Dan Cook. Um, he said this line to us that just grabbed my attention, and he said, "The church is the worst steward of square footage of any organization in our country, except for maybe the NFL."
Yeah.
And he said, like, we have hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of square foot that sit fallow all week long. And we could be redeeming this square footage for kingdom purposes. And why aren't we? And I'm telling you, like, it just so jarred me that I started leaning in. And by the time we left there, we bought hook, line, and sinker everything this guy was peddling. He ended up being our architect for our project years later. But it was a paradigm changing conversation that we had that day that really got me to rethinking. And from that, kind of going back and having a discussion with our staff, what would this look like?
Mm-hmm.
And then talking to our elders about it, and then having family meetings about it. Like, it's a big sell to make a change like this. How do you get, if you're going to relocate, how do you raise millions of dollars for a building that is not going to be your church's building? You gotta be able to cast a pretty clear vision around that, and that's the journey we started on that day, really.
Wow. Okay. First of all, I love that you didn't follow your own advice. So everybody stand strong. We're not, and then
Right.
you just bought it.
I'm really good
Second
at
of
that.
all, the free lunch strategy, Jesus used free lunch to do ministry a couple of times.
He
So that
did. Yep.
you
On
can't
more
knock
than one
that.
occasion.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But you talked about having to just now you talked about you had to kind of share the vision of why you might want to change
Right.
the idea of a philosophy of a building. And I know you have a few different benefits to that of switching the philosophy of building and inviting the community into your building outside normal church service
Yep.
times and things like that. And one of those you talk about in your chapter is this idea of a familiar space of the
Yeah.
church becoming a familiar space of the
Yeah.
community. What do you mean by that, and why is that so important in today's culture?
So a couple things, like, just to say, like, what we ended up doing, because it kind of sets the table for some of that. So we ended up opening a preschool and an event center. So our space is, we have an office space that is for our church staff, and then the rest of the building is being used every day of the week for either an event center, 5 days a week for the school. So for us, it's we open this event center kind of thing. That's not necessarily for everybody, but the idea is around this idea of familiar space. I think people in our community, and if you're a church leader, if you've ever invited someone to come to church, you know this. If you invite, my chiropractor friend, I invite him to church, and he would say things like, if I walk in that church building, the roof's going to cave in on me. Because he has this idea that this space is like this sacred space that an unchurched person shouldn't walk into,
fear. You should be
a
afraid
little
of.
bit of fear, like he doesn't belong here. And we all work to create inviting spaces, and we try to create cultures in our churches. I know we do that will welcome anyone, no matter who they are. But the perception that people have about our spaces is that they are sacred and that they don't really belong. And so one of the things that we have found here is through our school, through the event center, at our New Here luncheons that we do, it's very common for us to go around the room and, hey, how did you hear about us? And the answer is, oh, I had a business function there and I didn't know a church was there. And then when someone invited me, I was like, oh yeah, I've been to that space. And the roof didn't cave in on them, right?
Yeah.
So they were able to come in here under a neutral kind of environment for them, and saw that, oh, there's a church that meets here. And when an invite came, it seemed like an okay thing to say yes to, because they've been in that space and nothing terrible happened to them.
Okay, I love that. So obviously one of the key philosophies of Irresistible Church Network and many others is that we want to remove unnecessary obstacles.
Right. Yep.
And so
And our space itself can be an unnecessary obstacle.
Exactly. So when you guys, the way you guys utilize your building, that unnecessary obstacle of unfamiliarity or even fear is removed in some cases. So people are, oh yeah, I'll check that church out. I went to an event there, or that's the preschool week. Okay, I love that.
Yep.
What about the other thing you talk about, not just a familiar space, but another benefit, or not just benefit, but a reason to do it,
right,
is that your church building becomes an asset to the community rather seen as a drain on the community. Talk about that.
Right. Yeah. So there's a couple things around this, but one of those is like there's a town right next to us, Portsmouth, Virginia. It's a little bit more urban than where we are. It's 5 minutes from us. They actually have on their books for the city that they will not allow any more, they will not rezone any more space for nonprofits, because they've hit a percentage of acreage in their city that is no longer taxable, and it's not sustainable for the city. And so that's not just unique to Portsmouth, Virginia. That's a growing trend around our country, where localities are becoming more resistant to those, rezoning of commercial properties or potential tax revenue properties that are getting taken off the tax books. And so localities are a little bit resistant to allow churches to buy, large swaths of land to be able to build something spectacular, and then the city misses out on tax revenues. So that's one piece of this.
Yeah.
But the other is churches have a tendency to, like I talked about on the road trip, like the chains over the driveway, like they form this bunker mentality where they use their space to withdraw from their community and not engage it. And it sends a message to the community that, like, well, that we're not really a part of that community. And so, for us, the community facing church idea, that we wanted to build a space that our community could use. And we wanted this space to be for our community, not just us. Like, we're for our community, of course we are, but we wanted our space to be for our community. So when we opened up our event center here, we actually had a Chamber of Commerce event. where the mayor came, and I couldn't have written a script that was better for us. She was so appreciative of our church being in this community and opening our doors to our community. And the result is we look like community players because we are. And
Right.
every church wants to be that, but we've taken steps to actually engage our community right where they are. And we've met a need in this part of our community. There is no large meeting spaces that are available, or not many anyway. And so we met a need that our community has. It puts us in the community, and it brings the community to us. We're now players with the people around us.
Oh, I love that. I love that. Yeah, that definitely um lets the community know that you guys are for the community, not just in saying that, but in your action, the way you've opened up and utilized the building,
Yeah,
uh,
even our spaces for our community. Of
even
course
the
we are,
space.
but
I
even our
love that.
spaces. Yep.
Okay, well, we'll talk about this for a second, because on one hand, you could say, well, this is an amazing strategy to remove obstacles and change people's perception about Jesus and the church, and to provide a familiar place to make it easier for someone to come to church and meet Jesus. But you also talk about in your chapter, this is might be even more than just a good strategy for reaching people. This, you say in your chapter, this might also just be a plain stewardship issue of the way
100%.
churches should be utilizing buildings and finances in and of itself. Talk a little bit
Yeah.
about.
Yeah. So, I mean, if someone decided that they were going to use their space for something other than their church, which is really what we're talking about, using your space to open it up to the community, you don't even have to do it for rent.
Mm-hmm.
But if you open up your building to your community for them to use in other ways, I mean, that's still a stewardship of space. You're still using your space to engage your community, even if you are uncomfortable with the idea of doing it for hire.
Yeah.
It still can become a stewardship issue. But I think increasingly, and for us, the decision that we made was it was also a financial stewardship issue. So we have all of this money that's tied up into a space. Do we really want to just let that space sit empty all the time, except for the days that we're using it as a church, 1 or 2 days that we use it? And for us, the answer was, so you think about in Matthew 21, Jesus tells the story of the talents, and he gives certain number of talents to 3 different people. And the last person, they're afraid that they're going to lose their talent. So they bury their talent. And from my perspective, the talents they're the assets that the king has given us. And by and large, the church is sitting on they're just sitting on their
Oh, yeah.
assets. And I think there's going to come a day where the servant was called wicked and lazy because they didn't do something with what they were given. And so we have this amazing space that we get to use as a church on Sundays and whatever other day we're operating. But the days that we're not, it will generate some revenue. That's one
Yeah.
piece of it for us.
Uh-huh.
It's a stewardship of people. So people come into our space. Last year, we had 20,000 people come through our space over
Oh,
the
wow.
course of 165 different events that were hosted here. So 20,000 people, that's a lot of people who get some exposure to who we are and where we're located. And many of those people end up coming and paying a visit. So it's a stewardship of people in our community. So we want to make sure that this space is being fully utilized, not just sitting empty. And when that day comes, did we steward our space well? Man, I want to be able to say yes to that.
Yeah. No, I love that. That's a thought-provoking way to think about it. Now I know you did talk about in that the way you guys have chosen to use your particular building with event centers and even the school, things like that.
Right.
Those are, like you said, those are also revenue generating operations, correct?
Yeah, they are.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah. So I know there's different ways people could do it. Somebody could say, we're just going to use our
100%.
building and donate things, but you guys have chosen a route where some of those things are even revenue producing. So
Yep.
what do you say? Because we know the second we hear that, somebody's gonna go, oh,
Oh,
wait,
yeah.
revenue producing. This seems a little fishy. Is this, the church supposed to be making
Yep.
money and being for a community? And is this even is this similar to what Jesus got mad about in the temple and the money
Right.
changers and like help? So if we're starting to worry and wonder how this all fits together, how do you reconcile all that, and how do you see that if somebody has questions about that?
Yeah, so I mean, early on, this was one of the pushbacks that we would get, and yeah, Jesus went in, he tossed the money exchanger tables and said, my house is supposed to be a house of prayer. You're turning it into this, marketplace den of thieves. Are we doing that? Would Jesus come in here and flip our tables? And context is everything. So the reason Jesus was so upset with these money changers was that these people were interfering with the people were coming into the temple. They were there to encounter God. They were trying to worship God. And these people were exploiting their desire to pursue God, to make money. And they served as an obstacle between them and God. So the very thing that you were saying earlier, like we don't want to make it hard for people to come to God. In fact, they were making it hard for people.
Right.
And so for us, the market that we're using our space for, first of all, we're different than the temple because this building is not a church.
Mm-hmm.
We're the church. We know this. Like the people are the church. The building is not a church. The building is a building where the church meets. And that's one of our taglines here. Even on our building, it says Hub 757, which is our event center, home of Believers Church. And one of the things that we say all the time to our church is, we are the church, and this is the building that we meet. So we're a portable church because we're all over our community.
Yeah.
And we have a permanent location. This is where we gather for our times of worship. And so, we're here as a church, but when we leave here, the church left, the building remains. And so, it's not interfering with people pursuing their relationship with God because they're not coming. The people who are renting our space for a birthday party aren't trying to come here to meet God, and we've thwarted their efforts by throwing a birthday party.
Yeah.
They want to use our space for a birthday party, so that's what they're using it for. And on Sundays they can come here and they can pursue God and encounter God. And as we leave here as a church, hopefully every one of us are facilitating someone's pursuit of God where they are in our community, because the church has scattered at that point.
Absolutely. Okay. I love that. That's a great perspective. I just know we know that that's a question.
Oh, for sure it is.
Have or as we're all trying to glorify God and make sure we're honoring Jesus, even with the way we use our buildings and our finances, obviously.
Yeah.
So I just want to remind everybody, we are going to do a Q&A at the end of this interview. So please go ahead in the chat, change your chat setting to everyone and put your questions in the chat. And we will make sure those get to Jamey at the end for a Q&A. Jamey, I did want to ask you though, as we're listening to this, there may be some of us on here, they're like, yes, this resonates. This sounds good. I've been already thinking about some of this stuff. I didn't really know how to do it, but this sounds awesome. I would love to shift in this direction. But this sounds like a lot of work and a lot of time I don't have. Already am behind doing all the things I already do of leading my team, pastoring my people, writing sermons. How do you speak into that? Somebody says, this sounds great, but
who's got
time for this?
And nobody's got time for this. It's hard enough leading a church, and it's hard enough leading a staff, and it's hard enough, the job we have is already difficult. Doesn't this make it, exponentially more complicated? In some ways, there are complicating factors, like it creates tension. And as Andy often says, tensions are there to manage. So like the tensions aren't necessarily bad. I would choose to have the tensions that we have with the entities that we have in place than I would not have them. But as it relates to like, who's got time for this? I don't run the event center and I don't run a school. I do my best to lead a church.
Right.
And we've hired staff to lead those things. So everyone on our team has a specific focus, and it's intentionally, we're trying to limit the focus that we have so that we can do the thing that we have in front of us and do it well. And so we have an event center director that runs our event center. Her job is to have that be successful. And she doesn't have to worry about running the church. She's got to run an event center.
Right.
And same with the school. You know, we have a director that does an amazing job running the school. I don't run the school. And when parents have a complaint about the school, they don't come to me. They go to the director of the school, because we've created like these walls of separation between these entities that allow each one to run in their lane, to do it well, to put their focus there. And so, yeah, there's these things that are going on, but my focus is not those things. My focus is leading the church. And one of the warnings that I would give, if anyone wants to go in this direction, you don't want to burn out your church staff doing non-church related things.
Yeah.
Having said that, I would also say each of these entities are ministry in their own right.
True.
So there also can be like this competition that can arise in this framework that we've put together here, where it feels like there's a competition for space. And if you're not careful, you could say, well, I want to use this space for ministry, and you're using the space to make money.
Yeah.
And ministry is what we're supposed to be about. And my answer to that is, we're all doing ministry. It just looks different. So our event center is a ministry.
Yeah.
It's bringing people into our space that wouldn't ordinarily be here.
Mhm.
And we're able to rub shoulders with them and show the love of Jesus to them, and conduct ourselves in such a way that it's a good reflection on who Jesus is, and on who the church is. And that's a ministry. They
Mhm.
also have a ministry of revenue. And that is a ministry. If you don't believe it's a ministry, stop receiving an offering in your church, because it's a ministry. It's part of ministry, right? So that revenue stream is a part of ministry. And same with the school. There are kids that are coming from unchurched homes that are being taught Jesus principles at a young age. That's ministry. It looks very different than the church, but it's still ministry. So we're all doing ministry. We're just doing it differently. And yeah, I want to make sure that the ministry of the event center is being led by the director of the event center, not by the pastor of the church.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
I love that. And I can see how that would be a tension to manage, but such an important way you framed it. Because even in a church that isn't utilizing its building in this way, there's already the temptation to have silos and turf wars,
For sure.
even within the ministries of a church. And then when you add the complexity of an event center, a preschool, different things like that,
Yep.
I could definitely see how some people say, well, this isn't ministry. This isn't real ministry, or this isn't as much
Right.
ministry as mine
Yeah.
is. So I love that you have been so intentional in making sure everybody understands that. And I'm sure things creep up and pop up from time to time. You have to
Oh, they for sure do. It's one of those
readdress.
things you have to constantly cast vision around that.
Yeah. But so with that in mind, though, you did also in the chapter talk about this idea of, there is kind of a mantra you guys have about being Sunday ready. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know if that's a priority, or like, I don't know what that exactly means, but like basically like, even though we're all doing ministry, we got to, everybody is in agreement. We got to be Sunday ready. So tell me how you balance that. How does that balance and work together?
Yeah. So, the mantra of Sunday ready, in some ways, it's always just like room ready, because when we're done on Sundays, we want to set our room to neutral. So,
okay. So it's really more about being respectful, making sure
being respectful of each entity, being respectful of the other entities.
Whoever has it next.
Whoever has it next. So we have kind of a neutral setting, which happens to be pretty much Sunday ready.
Yeah.
Our neutral setting is the chairs are in the auditorium, the things are what they are. So when we're done with the space on Sunday, if we have portable signs, because we don't have a lot of, we're not hanging stuff on the walls, because if you're having an event, you don't want to have a big sign that says small group sign up here hanging over your hanging over your birthday party or whatever it is that you're doing. So most of our signage is kind of portable that way. So we put all the portable stuff away, and it's ready for events throughout the week. And on Saturday evening, when the last event has been done for that Saturday, the parking lot gets cleaned up. The chairs get restacked in the way that they're supposed to be for Sunday. The commons area is cleared and ready for us to move our signage back out there. Yeah, so and Sunday ready also, though, is like, we're not renting out. I don't care how big the pay bill is, like, we're not renting the space out on Sunday morning. That's when our church gathers,
Gotcha,
so
gotcha.
there is a priority also, that everything has to be ready for the ministry that happens here on Sundays. We are a church that meets here. Yeah,
So
so
you're not getting chased out every now and then because you forgot to book that.
but you do bring up an interesting point,
Okay.
and that is, we do have to schedule.
Right.
So like, if we're doing something outside of our ordinary service times, it is on us as a ministry to schedule that. So, Easter's coming up, Good Friday service. If we don't schedule our space for Good Friday and someone else books it, we could lose the space. So it forces us as a ministry to be very proactive. I'm a ridiculous planner. So for me, this is my love language. I love being planned way out in advance. But the very first year we did this, we were going to do something on a Saturday of Easter, and an event got booked, and we said, okay, that event's going to happen on Saturday. And next year, if we want to have the space on Saturday, Easter Saturday, we better plan ahead for that.
Gotcha. Okay. I love that. Okay. So, Jamey, I have one last question to ask you, but before I ask you that question, I do have two or three things I do want to remind everybody watching today about. And the first is that this is a series of webinars that we're doing about this book, and the book is coming out this summer, and it's written by multiple authors, all of which are lead pastors of churches in the Irresistible Church Network. And the next webinar that's coming up next month is going to be talking about how can the church navigate and embrace diversity within the church. And then two, if this is something that is kind of piquing your interest, this idea of hey, how do we think about church buildings differently? How do we think about church differently? How do we remove obstacles in order to design our churches to attract and engage unchurched people? Well, there is a conference coming up in May 1st and 2nd, called Drive Conference at North Point Community Church here in Alpharetta, Georgia. And this conference is all about not only this topic of the way we view church buildings and removing obstacles, but everything comprehensive, A to Z, how we do ministry. So if that's something you're interested in learning more about, you might want to check out driveconference.com and bring your team, your staff, elders, volunteers to Drive Conference in May. And then also, like I said, be on the lookout for this book that's coming out in this summer called A Church Every Community Needs. So be on the lookout for that stuff. Okay, so Jamey, the last question I have you is there's probably people listening in, watching this. They're like, okay, this sounds great. I'm sold. I don't know really what to do or where to start. What kind of advice would you give those people? Like, what would you tell them? Remember this, remember that, start here. Like, what's kind of your words of your challenge, your charge to the people that are ready to change the way they think about church buildings?
Yeah, I think, if that's where you are and you're ready to kind of pull the trigger, I would say, take your time, first of all. Like, really think it through. You don't want to start something that bombs. That's not going to be a great reflection on the church. You don't want to start a business that 12 months later just fizzles. So, like, really be prayerful, really be intentional. Do your homework, look around your community, what needs are present that your church might be able to meet with the space. And it might be just like you have lots of lands. Well, open up your land to community soccer leagues or whatever. And it may not be what we're doing, but just be thinking about what the needs are in your community and try to ask, like, is there a way that what we have can intersect with a need that our community has, so that we are now viewed as a player in our community that really cares about what's happening, rather than just propping up a bunch of programs that are trying to pull people from the community into your space. Rather than go through all that, find a need that would naturally draw people to your space.
Yeah, I love it. And that's how you guys landed uniquely
That's
on an event center
it
for
is.
meeting space, large
Yep.
meeting spaces, and preschool.
Yeah,
I love it.
yep. We did a market analysis on event spaces to see what was available, and that was one of those obvious needs that we had.
Okay, perfect. Great. Well, with that said, Jamey, you want to jump into some Q&A, some questions?
Let's do it.
Okay. The first question here comes from Michael, and he says, "What does Believers Church call its event center if someone attends an event there and does not know it's a church?" So, what do you call
Yeah.
like? What is it known as? And I think you might have mentioned it in the
Yeah,
earlier,
I
but remind
did.
everybody how you.
So our event center is just Hub 757. 757 is our area code.
Okay.
So we want to be the hub of this community. That's where the idea comes from. On our building, in big letters, is Hub 757, and in little letters underneath it is Home of Believers Church. So it is indicated on the outside of the building that there is a church that meets here.
Right.
And if you go to our website, the event center website or the school website, there's a link to the church through that as well. So there's some visibility on the building itself. And if you're exploring our event center, there's a connection.
It's not some kind of secret that
Not a
there's a
clandestine. Yeah, we're not trying to gotcha anybody.
Yeah, but if somebody in the community gets invited to an event, they will be told it's at Hub 757. Is that how?
That is true. And even oftentimes at church, we'll say, hey, there's an event going on. It's at the hub.
Okay.
So the hub is really the reference to our building, and
Yeah.
our church is, as I said, we're not. That's one of those big misnomers, like the church is a
Right.
building, and it's just not. So we want to constantly reinforce this idea that for many people, they have this notion that you go to church, and that's not what we do. We are the church. And
Okay.
so it's part, even our branding is part of reinforcing that idea.
Gotcha. Okay. This next question comes from Jose down in Orlando, and he's wanting to know, how do you manage the immediacy of responding to the needs of the tenants, clients of the event center and school versus the relaxed approach that volunteer administrative teams tend to have?
I'm not sure I fully get the gist of that question, but if the question is like, so our designated event center staff are the ones who tend to the needs of whatever the events happen to be. So there's an event center director. For each event, there's a staff member that is responsible for that event. If there's something that's going on within an event, that's who they turn to. There's no way that they're going to accidentally turn to a church staff member for help with anything. So I don't know if that gets at the heart of that question. What do you think?
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. I wonder if it's so it's basically the people that are running the event center and the people that are running the school, those are not volunteers. Those are paid employees.
Correct. Those are employees. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I wonder if that was it. Like, I wonder if it was like you have volunteers running this, but then you have urgent needs of the paying tenants and clients.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. We don't have volunteers running those things. Those are all paid people.
Okay. Okay. Gotcha. Yep. Okay. Perfect. Jose, hope that helped. If it doesn't,
I hope so.
Message me or send in another question. We'll make sure we get
that
question answer for you. All right. This next one comes from David. And he's asking, how do you curate activities or restrict groups that may have a worldview or positions not keeping with the church's statement of faith? How do you protect yourself from legal risk?
Yeah, I love this question. I
Yeah.
get asked this question a lot. So it's a little contrarian what I'm about to say, but
Mhm.
we are not trying to figure out ways to keep people out.
Yeah.
So this is not you don't have to share our belief statement to hold an event here.
Hmm.
And sometimes when a church person will get angry, um, that's one of the things that they will say, like,
Yeah.
well, what's the limit? What
Well,
if
the idea
someone,
is if you allow any group to
yeah,
meet
if you
in the
allow any
building, that
group in
you're
here,
putting a
it's
stamp of approval on
we're going to put our
everything
stamp of approval on it, or it's going to be some crazy thing and it's going to look bad on the church, and it's not going to, it's going to contradict what we say we believe, and that's going to send a mixed message and whatever. I mentioned this earlier, but we had 165 events in 2023,
Hmm.
and not one of them was a wild, crazy event that, you know, like people love to come up with a scenario like, well, what if, this happened? What if that happened? Well, I mean, we've been open for 5 years. None of that has happened.
Oh,
And
okay.
so we've not had, like, are there instances where we would say no to an event? Maybe is kind of
Yeah.
my answer.
Yeah.
Um, but
Have you had
at
any
the
on the
very
edge?
least,
Have you ever been like, we need to talk about this?
no, not really.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay. I didn't know if you're
Yeah.
like, yes, we have, and we decided to go ahead and do it, or if you're just like, no,
So
we've
our
really never
our
been.
our knee jerk is to even if it's someone that we disagree with,
Yeah.
why would we not want to expose them
Yeah.
to the church and to a loving example of Jesus? So, yeah, there are events that happen here that would kind of go against. I've had church members say, for a wedding that was here, well, I saw cases of booze being loaded into the church.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're very upset about it. And I would say, well, first of all, they weren't being loaded into the church. They were being loaded into a building where our church happens to meet.
Right.
Second of all, it was a wedding that you weren't even invited to. So I don't know why you're offended by that. Like, our knee jerk is going to be able to say, yes, we can facilitate that because, our objective here is to show the love of Christ to everyone, not just to the people we agree with.
Yeah. Okay. I love it. That's great. That was a good question though, because I could see
A great question.
lots of
Yeah.
people wondering about that.
Yeah.
Okay. The next question is from Eric. And he says, how does nonprofit make rental income? And
Yeah.
did you have to make a separate organization?
That's also a great question. So our two entities operate under our same status as a church. I don't know how all that works. Like they're their own entity, but they operate under our tax exempt or something like that.
Yeah.
But I can tell you this: um, the city here, it's a different kind of animal. Like a church that has a for-profit arm, if you will, is an anomaly, and the city really didn't know how to handle that.
Mhm.
And so when we first came here into this space, there was a little bit of give and take and tug of war with us and the municipality around it. And I can't speak for what your locality will do. What ours ended up doing was our school operates under the religious exemption clause in the state of Virginia. So they're non-taxable, and that's how that functions. The church is obviously non-taxable.
Yeah.
The event center has X amount of square footage that's available X amount of days of the week, and we pay property tax based on the availability of that and the rentals that kind of happen. So
Yeah.
they've come up with a formula. I'm not 100% sure it's even the most equitable or fair or whatever, but the result is We do pay some property tax on our space. It comes out of the revenue of the event center,
Mhm.
and it makes us a contributor to our community. And so, people who are angry that churches have tax exempt status, well, we do for the tax exempt activities that we have, and we don't for the non-tax exempt
Wow.
status
Okay.
activities that we have. And that makes us a good community partner. That's kind
Yeah.
of how I view it.
Yeah, that's interesting because that's a whole, I didn't even think about the
That's a whole new ball of
footage
wax.
and
Yeah.
property. Yeah. But from an income or revenue thing, I know churches all the time that charge for like a youth camp, and sometimes
Right.
one camp will even make money,
Yeah.
and that money is used to subsidize other camps or other ministries and things like that. And
Right.
it doesn't have anything to do, it doesn't negate the nonprofit status of the, at the end of the day,
Right.
the organization as a whole is nonprofit, even
Yeah,
though,
and I know of churches that have done this that don't pay taxes. So I mean, I think it depends on the locality. It's just an unusual thing, and it's worth engaging in conversations. I would say, like, don't do it under the radar. Be as transparent as you can with your locality about what you're doing, and have a conversation with them.
yeah, yeah, okay. Um, One question is, and I think you touched on this briefly, but could you kind of re-explain kind of how the scheduling works? It's
Yep.
does your church have to book space in at the hub just like everybody else, and kind of how that works exactly?
Yeah, so the short answer is yes, we do. But the longer answer is our event center director, we use it through Planning Center Online. The scheduling function that's available through the calendar function in Planning Center is how all of our space gets booked. And we put into that our normal service times
Mhm.
and our normal activities. Um, and those get automatically off the availability calendar for rental. And if we have something outside of the ordinary, then we have to book it. And we have to book it before someone else does, or we don't get it because they sign a contract to use that space. And we're not going to, that's the least Jesus-like thing we could do, is cancel
Right.
someone else's event because we want it before them. So yeah, so if it's outside of normal schedule times, yeah, we have to book that space. I saw a question in there too about, like, what do you do with other events like small groups and
Yeah.
all that kind of stuff, right? So same kind of deal. You have to make a decision um what you want your space to really accomplish.
Mhm.
And there was some tension here around some small group stuff and event center space stuff. Um, and so, that's one of those tensions that you have to kind of manage. And so for us, we uh, just looked at, what nights are the most rentable. There are some nights that it's almost, very unusual to rent. Those are the nights that we schedule our small groups here. So we have our small groups use mostly um, our school space after school is done,
So
mostly.
how does that fall for you guys? Like nights, like which nights are usually Bible studies
Yeah.
and groups and
So for us, we have a couple groups on Monday and a couple groups on Tuesday, and we try to decentralize everything else.
okay.
And decentralized groups, I mean, really that's more sustainable. Like, no
Mhm.
matter how big your space is, you're going to run out of space if you're constantly running all your groups into your space. So
Sure.
for us, like, it's ideal to not have the space here. But
Right.
there are some instances where it just makes more sense to do it here for a variety of reasons. So we do have some, but they're blacked out on the calendar so that they can't be rented on those times.
Yeah. Okay. Good. All right, last question here. This is a great question. Someone talks about the fact that they do utilize their building to run like language training school for people that are from different countries and things like
Yep.
that. And yet they've really struggled. Those people are completely separate from the church. They've never really seen much um,
Okay.
happen from people participating in events at the events or at their version of the event center and ever, becoming, coming to the church, anything like that. Can you share any, you're like, yeah, that's just how it is? Or you're like, hey, here's some tricks of the trade or some things we've seen work well to help bridge that gap? Or you're like, no, we're really not even trying to. That's not even the point. Like, I don't know. How would you address that if somebody feels that as a tension of they're like not seeing that migration?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And I mean, part of the answer is just because they show up at an event doesn't automatically mean they're going to show up at church, right? So, I mean, that's one thing, fix your expectations in such a way. But then the other side of that would be, for us, a lot of that interaction is happening with those who are organizing the event. So when someone's organizing a business function, you have a point of contact. That's the person that that you're in contact with and conversation with. And our event center director happens to be someone who loves Jesus and loves our church. And they will talk with clients about, yeah, when do you want to use it? Because we have a church that uses it on these things and this time. And so it's just a natural part of the booking process to talk about that there's a church that's here. So
Yeah.
that's just one thing. So not everyone who shows up at the event necessarily will see that it's church related, but certainly the organizers do. The other thing that I would say to that is depending on the event, there are things that we can do. So we had when COVID shut the schools down, we opened up our space for learning centers, online learning centers where kids were doing their Zoom schooling here.
Okay.
And when we did that, it was very easy to talk about who we are as a church and introduce them to next gen people and all of those kinds of things. So it depends a little bit on the event. Amazon used our space for some training, and they didn't want any mention of church at all. And so like in that instance, we didn't leave. Sometimes we'll give invites, or we'll offer refreshments, or we'll do something else depending on what the event is. But in that case, it was just with the director or with the point of contact. And our event center director was telling me that now that we've been open for as long as we have several clients that are booking year after year after year. And now she's starting to have spiritual conversations with some of the people that have booked multiple times because the interactions that they've had have been so positive, and maybe there's something going on in their lives that caused them to now start asking some questions. And so it's just a natural part of being a Jesus follower in a business atmosphere. You address it as it comes up, and we're grateful for those opportunities that come along.
Okay, good. Yeah, I love that. That's great perspective, because I could see how you could fall into a trap of, oh man, this event happened and then we didn't see any of those people come to our church over the next year or something like that. So I could see how, yeah.
Yeah. So then you start
letting
looking
it
at,
be known.
right, what are some of the other benefits? Like if there's income from it, well, there was income from it. If there was exposure, well, you got exposure. And we all know, people don't come to faith the first time they're exposed to it. It's incremental. So just they're seeds. They're just little seeds that are being dropped.
I love it. Jamey, thank you so much for
Yeah, it was
jumping
so
on here
fun.
today. Thank you for writing this chapter. The church, should the church stop building church building? So intriguing, such a great thing to think about and reconsider. Thank you for spending all this time with us today and
Happy to
answering
do
our
it.
questions. And we can't wait to hear the stories of how God continues to use you guys and your building and the hub there. And yeah, man, this is awesome. So thank you. And thank
Thanks,
you
Louis. I
everybody
appreciate it.
else for joining us today. Again, this is part 2 of a webinar series. We'll have another webinar next month in March about another chapter of this book that's coming out this summer called A Church Every Community Needs. So can't wait to see you guys then. If you need anything at all between now and then, let us know. Thank you guys. Have a great day. See you,
Take care.
Jamey. Have a
See
good one,
you.
my friend. Bye, buddy.